Hello and welcome back to another episode of Let's Chat. And before we kick things off, I just want to give a big thank you, and I should have done this in the Jed Keith video. I want to give a big thank you to the Pulaski County Library for giving me this room to be able to talk to, yeah, there we go, I'll insert an applause sound effect there. To talk to fine folks like Mr. Chris Harris here, a local news writer and just an all-around interesting fella to say the least. Alrighty, so Chris, you say you dabble in a little bit of writing, right?
I've done that for many years. Yes.
Oh, can you put a number to that?
I don't know about a number, probably since I remember around, 9-10 years old, I had this big heavy manual typewriter, probably weighed about half as much as I did at the time because I was a little kid. And I'd carry it around with me everywhere and write these little half-page Mario Brothers stories and type them up on there. So,
and so before you got more so into like news writing, you went to college actually for screenwriting, right?
Yep, I went to a school called the University of the Arts in Philadelphia, and majored in writing for film and television. We claim as our alumni at that school people like Jared Leto went there, Meredith from The Office, Heather Donahue from Blair Witch Project. We have a few famous people who went there, but that's what I thought I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. In high school, I was like, I'm interested in TV, I'm interested in movies, that's what I want to do. The program that they had there fit that, and I fell in love with the city when I got there, and so that was a fun 4 years, and obviously, that's not what I ended up doing, but I have written some plays and things in the meantime. And, training for any kind of writing helps you immensely in life. Mm-hmm. And even doing journalism now. I mean, learning to write better in any form helps you do that. Mm-hmm. So,
and I'm glad you mentioned journalism there. How exactly, you went to this big school for screenwriting, playwriting, or just that kind of field. And yet you stumbled back here in old little Somerset, Kentucky for the local newspaper. How'd that happen?
Well, I'm from here originally. And of course, I stayed in Philly for about half a year after I graduated. And I was looking for an agent. And I thought, I can look for an agent a lot more cheaply here than I can there. I had a little 1-bedroom apartment, and I was paying, close to $1,000 a month for that on my own. So that was not cheap. So I got back here, and I worked in my folks' office at Taxmasters for a while. And one of their clients had a connection with the paper, and they'd mentioned something about there being an opening for sports editor. Well, there really wasn't. I'm not sure totally where that came from. Of course, I'm thinking, oh, well, I'll try for that. Me not realizing, that's a lot harder job than it would be to just walk in off the street and say, hey, I'll do that. But, I had that hubris, I guess, to think that. So I walked in, and the news editor at the time asked me for a writing sample, and I gave it to him. So it's something sports related, and they needed stringers. They needed sports stringers, people to write games by the story. And so they hired me to do that, and I did a bunch of those stories over the next year and a half. And by the time that they actually had an opening in the newsroom in 2004, they were like, well, this guy's been doing a whole lot of work for us. Why don't we just bump him up into that? So I always say, I planned on being a screenwriter, but John Lennon said life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. And I think that's kind of how it turned out for me.
But you've still written stuff like scripts, right?
Yeah.
You want to just spitball some of the things you've concocted in that field?
Well, the one I'll talk about is the one that has actually gone somewhere. I wrote it. I actually sort of started on the seeds of it back in college, and didn't really perfect it until later on. But it was a play called Waiting for Bardot, play on Waiting for Godot. But had to do with this man's obsession with like a poster of the film actress Brigitte Bardot. And I like wordplay. I like the pun aspect of that. I thought that was fun to play with. So in 2012, I thought, I'm going to really take this idea and kind of flesh it out. And then stuff happened, and I put it aside for a while and didn't think about it. And eventually, I started doing stuff with SEC. I started acting in some of their plays in 2013. So I kind of got revved up. But they had a short play series called Sketches. I thought, well, I'll submit it for that. Well, we didn't do that in 2014, but The late, great Mark Isham, who was a professor at SEC and also involved in the theater program, he was doing the Readers Theater series in 2015, and I gave him the play to look at. He's like, yeah, let's do it. So we did that one at SEC for the first time.
Oh.
And then the now retired Steve Kleberg submitted it for me in the Kentucky New Play Series contest. So it won a spot in that in 2016, and we got to go up to Louisville and do it at a new play showcase at the Kentucky State Fair.
Oh my gosh.
And then a couple years after that, Flashback did it as part of a series of short plays that they were doing before American Hero. So I've actually had one play that has won something and has been performed 3 times in 3 different venues.
So. Kudos to you. That is awesome, man.
And I need to work on more, which is hard to do when I'm writing during the day. But,
yeah. You ever feel that writer's burnout at all?
Oh yeah. It's hard to go home at night and think I'm going to work on my own thing when you're doing that for a living during the day.
Yeah.
But there are times that I get my inspiration fired up enough to go, I'm going to sit down and bang something out.
So you've done all sorts of facets of writing. You got screenwriting, playwriting, news writing, I'm sure some fiction writing here and there, just like regular storytelling.
Yeah, a few short stories.
Oh, now I'm curious. But what would you say, which facet do you feel closely drawn to?
I'm a creative writer at heart. And so however that manifests, of course, I like I like scripts and I like screenplays. That's what I've honed the most. I like that way of storytelling. In prose, you feel like you have to, I don't know that flowery is the right word, but it's a very different type of writing, whereas screenwriting is very Spartan, and you learn to tell things by showing them without just, a lot of exposition. But even in journalism, I'm not I will never pretend to be Woodward or Bernstein. That's not where I come from. I work at a community journalism newspaper, and that's what I like doing. I like that there can be a degree of creativity there. Now, obviously not in everything. There are some stories where that would not be tasteful to do that, but in those stories that allows for some amount of creativity, I really enjoy that, and I think I hope that the readers do too.
I definitely see that storytelling aspect in that, as I'm a bit of a writer myself. I want to touch upon acting because you let that slip earlier that you started at SEC?
I really started with SEC back in high school, my senior year back in '98. I did a couple of things with them. I did a teen theater thing that was directed by John Alexander. And then a couple behind the scenes type things. I did the lighting board at the center for one of their plays, and then some behind the stage stuff. But in 2013, I've been kind of itching. I've been going to a lot of the plays at SEC and kind of itching to get into that. I kind of needed something at that time. I kind of needed to involve myself in something.
Yeah.
So I got involved, and it was great. I found something that I really loved, and a great theater family there. It's made up of lots of awesome people, which is how I met you.
Yeah.
And Radio Suspense Theater.
Yeah.
Then also with Flashback Theater Company, I've done a lot with them.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because coming up for the holiday season, Mr. Kris Harris here is playing the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Kris Kringle. See, he's already growing the beard out for it and everything.
We're doing Miracle on 34th Street coming up. I think it's the first 2 full weeks of December. Oh, nice. And we're doing it at the Virginia. It's going to be the first play produced at the Virginia, which is, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. What's more Christmassy than the name Virginia right there? So, I've always liked the movie Miracle on 34. I love Christmas anyway. I'm a Christmas person. I love the Christmas music, the decorations, all that. But I always liked the movie Miracle on 34th Street. So when I found out they were doing it, I'm like, okay, I want to be a part of that. And I want to be a part of doing this at the Virginia. And I was not expecting to be cast as Kris Kringle, but they thought I was good for that part, and so I've been having fun with it. Can
you kind of give us a synopsis without spoiling what that show's about?
Miracle on 34th Street is, of course, it's been made into a movie a few times, and this is a play version of it. But the Macy's department store in New York has a sudden need for a Santa Claus to step in and meet with kids to tell them, their Christmas wishes and that sort of thing. and they happen to find someone who asserts that he is in fact Santa Claus, so he is perfect for the job. Of course, this idea encounters some resistance, so part of that involves having to prove that this person who claims to be Santa Claus is in fact the person that he claims to be.
Ooh,
so how do you do that? Well, that's the twist.
Well, I say that about wraps it up for this episode of Let's Chat. But thank you again, Mr. Harris, for joining me for this session.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. And that is a wrap.